How in the world does Will Smith go from this?
Keep my wife's name out your mouth!
To this? From being publicly scorned to being completely and lovingly embraced in one strategic interview appearance. There's a method that nobody is talking about. The truth is that any one of us at any time can be thrown into an unexpected and high-stakes scenario where our reputation depends entirely on how we navigate our response. There's an effortless solution to this though that will cure this painful vulnerability that most people are exposed to. Through the dissection of Will Smith's first interview after his radio silence, this video will hold your hand through the only 9-step method to reframing narratives, benefiting from controversy, and saving your reputation when all things seem lost. There happen to be exactly 9 steps here, so here it is put into the easiest acronym possible. Before we go into high-stakes interactions like this, it is wise to prepare. So pay attention and see if you can spot the first tactic that Will Smith uses to make a perfect first impression.
Welcome back to the Daily Show.
Kind sir.
How are you?
I am so good. I flew 30 hours to be here with you.
Having this be the first thing you say is extremely telling. Making a highly anticipated appearance like this after coming off of a 30-hour plane ride can be used strategically as a failsafe for if the interview goes bad. If it goes bad, then he has the implicit excuse that I was just traveling for 30 hours, so that's why I said the wrong thing. Will doesn't literally use that excuse here, but by having it be the first thing that he says, he is putting it there so that the people will subconsciously apply it to any faults or missteps that he may commit here on out in the interview. W is for warding off backlash, covering your bases beforehand so that if things go wrong, people will be more lenient. As Will begins to explain his most recent movie, there's one other strategic motif that Will takes on in the beginning. See if you can spot what is so off about it. If you like these videos, like, subscribe, and leave a comment because every single one counts, and your support means everything.
You know, when I read this script, man, it's like, you know, you've probably seen the image. It's a black man, and it's his, you know, his back and his arm, and he's sitting. So it's a pretty famous picture.
I think
American slavery was, you know, one of the most brutal aspects of human history.
Right.
You know, it was Antoine Fuqua. Just he did his thing on this, man, and.
It's gripping the whole way through. I'll take
Filler words like and you know are often used throughout the conversation when people generally don't know what to say. That's normal. What's strategic about what Will does here is the rapid frequency of which he is deploying this filler word of you know. The filler word of you know, when implemented over and over again, can actually serve as a verbal pacifying technique that makes an appeal to the judgment and involvement of the audience in a way that or doesn't. You know can serve as a subtle cue that invites the listener to agree or provide feedback. Even though they can't really do that in the audience, it still creates the illusion of fostering a more interactive and connected dialogue, which is exactly what you need if you are about to go into a really tough interaction. And when used over and over again, the chance of it being intentional for the purpose of gaining acceptance from the audience gets higher and higher. I is for influencing others' judgments. And if we are going to use filler words, we should use them to our advantage in a way that brings our counterparty closer to us. Now, diving into addressing the actual elephant in the room, see if you can notice Will's secret strategy when facing this thing and addressing it head on.
It's been a while since I lost, so it's been a while since many people have seen you.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been away. What y'all been doing?
Will immediately says, I've been away, acknowledging that he knows he has been lacking in the presence that the public has come to expect of him, essentially saying, I know what you guys are feeling right now. I know what you guys are expecting of me. When he says, what y'all been doing, the entire previous notion gets flipped on its head. By saying this, he is implicitly calling out how he is under no obligation to perform or constantly be in the public eye. With these two statements, he has implicitly told the audience that I know what you guys are expecting of me. But your expectations are not deserved. I have just as much a right to stay out of the public eye as you do. L is for leveraging expectations. Acknowledge and reframe them so that you and your audience can move forward on the same page. On your page. This is the implicit enforcement of a barrier against the eye of the prying public. It essentially sends the message that you are not guaranteed my presence in the same way that I am not guaranteed your presence as an audience. Let's see another example of how he reframes these expectations in real time. There's a special treat for subscribers in the description. Click the link below and claim your unfair advantage.
You had the Oscars,
Yeah.
where in one night you.
I have no independent recollection of the.
I can only imagine because you won.
As Will says, I have no independent recollection of that night, he breaks out in laughter and immediately looks towards the audience. By first looking at the audience before Trevor and really leaning in and digging into it, it is likely that he is trying to gain the favor of the audience here. This would be beneficial for Will, because if the audience is on Will's side here and is in collective agreement with him, then Trevor will be less likely to ask for specific details of that night. Trevor Noah, as a host, has the audience's best interests in mind. If he is able to notice that the audience is agreeing and laughing along with Will's statement of "I have no recollection," then Trevor is likely not going to want to pursue an avenue that he knows would likely contradict his audience's beliefs. Will likely either consciously or unconsciously knows this, because we don't see this emphatic of a laugh or this type of exaggeration behind his lean replicated in any other part of the interview. Once we've leveraged expectations, the next step is super tricky to spot, but insanely effective once you are able to notice and harness it.
Nuances and complexities to it, you know. But at the end of the day, I lost it, you know.
This moment right here triggers the audience to say to themselves, this is it. This is what we came for. This is the moment right here that we are all going to remember, so let's pay close attention. Will says this so that the audience is most closely paying attention right before he implements one of his biggest, most influential arguments for his position.
You just never know what somebody's going through. You know, in the audience right now, you know, you're sitting next to strangers, you know, and
Will is essentially implying to the audience that this belief you have, that everyone around you is just like you, is not the case. There are people going through hardships that you don't even know about. This implicitly allows Will to make the argument that your problem that you have with me is not justified. The audience has been waiting with bated breath to hear Will Smith speak up, but Will wants to go after the root that is causing the audience to feel entitled to a response. By attacking the root of where the beliefs and expectations come from, it allows the audience to change and understand Will's viewpoint easier. Whether he is right or wrong, targeting first the root of an issue makes a counterparty more susceptible to change. He's essentially saying, before you get mad at me and expect something from me, have you considered that you're wrong? By putting an emphasis on teaching this lesson before addressing the situation, Will wants to attack the root of the issue. You are more likely to change someone's beliefs by first changing the mindset that inspired those beliefs.
you're sitting next to strangers, you know, and somebody's mother died last week, you know, somebody's child is sick. You know, somebody just lost their job. Somebody just found out their spouse cheated. You know,
By saying you're sitting next to strangers, Will removes the power from the collective argument and serves in diminishing that audience/public versus Will tension. Will is essentially saying, you have all teamed up against me, but tell me, have you even looked at the treachery of your neighbors? And it implicitly sends the message that you are surrounded by people who would do similar things to the thing that you are mad at me for. This removes the individual from feeling like they were a part of some greater mob, and it puts them on their own. Now, instead of Will versus the public, it is now a much more tangible opponent. Will versus each individual.
It's like there's all these things and there's strangers, and you just don't know what's going on with people, you know? And
when Will says, you just don't know what's going on with people, he is rubbing in that implicit message of your solidarity against me is not as strong as you think. Not only that, but are you even justified in having this solidarity against me in the first place? The second L is for liberating the individual from the mob. Because by targeting the root before you target the argument, you will be able to send the message that not only is your position weak, but it is also unfounded. Now, after dismantling the mob, there's a specific tactic that you need to implement. Otherwise, this can backfire. See if you can spot the exact tactic.
I was going through something that night, you know, and not that justifies my behavior at all. I would just say,
Now, instead of the public feeling deserving of their anger and expecting something from Will has made the implicit argument so that the individuals can now realize that, oh, not only am I not a part of this mob anymore, but I'm beginning to understand that this guy did something that I might have done if I was in the mindset that he was in. By saying I was going through something that night, Will sends the message that now you understand that there are people all around you who would act like that. Well, that night, I was just one of those people. By then saying, not that it justifies it, Will doesn't want to force a conclusion on you, only imply it. Because it's much more effective if the listener is able to come to the desired conclusion on their own.
We just gotta be nice to each other, man. It's like, it's hard. And I guess the thing that was most painful for me is I took my heart and made it hard for other people,
By breaking down their previous beliefs and then building everything back up from the bottom, if the listener has agreed with him thus far, they will likely agree with his provided conclusion, which is a route to his forgiveness, when he says, we just have to be nice to each other. It's hard. It's hard has two interpretations. The first meaning that the experience of life is hard, which is one of self-forgiveness. The second interpretation is that it's hard to be nice to each other. And this one paints a path for the listener who is not sold and is still considering their forgiveness of Will. The S is for soliciting empathy. Winning the individual over after they are no longer part of the mob is vital in winning over the general public. When Will says, I took my heart and made it hard for other people, he is essentially saying, what I have done, I only did out of love. After getting the listener to empathize with you, there is still that lingering barrier of distrust. See if you can notice exactly what Will does to melt the barriers of distrust that are currently surrounding him on all sides.
It was, it was a lot of things. It was the little boy that watched his father beat up his mother. That was a rage that had been bottled for a really long time.
Right.
Will wants to send the implicit message that these weren't necessarily the actions of a grown man. No, this was potentially a little boy. And would you judge a little boy harshly like you are doing now? When Will talks about his bottled rage, he aids in further sending the message that I'm not the person that did that. I'm not a part of those people that do those things. In fact, I wouldn't even be able to do it again unless I stored up that part of myself for a really long time. M is for metamorphosis. You are not who you were. That subtle communication of an actual inability to do it again is what is going to allow him to gain the audience's trust back even faster. Now that the trust is reinstated, it can quickly fall back to how it was previously unless it's properly nurtured. Let's uncover the unique tactic that Will implements to nurture this newfound trust.
That's not who I want to be.
Right.
You've known me for a long time, so you know me personally, so you know. But, y'all might not know.
By the way Will turns to the audience when he says this, we know that this statement was not for Trevor. It's for the audience. And we see that Will is trying to implicitly build credibility within the audience's perception. This credibility is only going to aid in getting the audience to agree to the argument that he put forth before this. By saying, that's not who I want to be, and that's not who I am, it allows the audience to internalize much easier the statement of, the guy that's here now is not the same guy that made me disappointed. More than the statement of, the guy that disappointed me is here, let's see if I forgive him. I is for implicitly building credibility, because by leaning on Trevor's character and by detaching himself from his previous actions, it pushes the audience down a path towards changing their perception of Will. You can build credibility, but it takes one more thing to truly transform them and take them exactly where you need them to go. See if you can spot what it is.
So Emancipation is Antoine's masterpiece.
That's what I want to ask you about.
These top artists in the world have done some of the best work of their career.
Yeah.
And the idea that they might be denied because of me is like, oh, it's like, I hope that their work will be honored and their work will not be tainted based on, a horrific decision on my part.
Will is essentially saying here, and making the implicit argument to the audience, that you shouldn't just forgive me for my sake. You should forgive me and move past this for the sake of all the hardworking artists within this movie. In this way, he puts an offensive pressure on the audience to forgive him, because now his forgiveness would also mean that all these other artists would be rightfully celebrated. Essentially saying, your decision to not forgive will now negatively impact innocent people. And if you do not forgive, now who is the bad guy? T is for transforming forgiveness into altruism. Will Smith has turned the action of forgiving him into an objectively positive and beneficial thing to do. In order to truly transform your audience into one that loves you and embraces you again, there's one last step which we will reveal right now.
That I had to forgive myself for being human, And it's like, trust me, there's nobody that hates the fact that I'm human more than me.
Yeah, I know that. No, but I know that, yeah.
An opportunity, to go out in the world and contribute in a way that fills my heart and hopefully helps other people, so.
I appreciate it.
Will feels comfortable finally saying out loud the implicit argument that he's been making this whole interview. I had to forgive myself for being human. What he previously had to imply through the use of stories and arguments, he is now able to explicitly say out loud, because he first targeted the root of their beliefs and then was able to dismantle their argument without ever having to directly confront it. By the time Will Smith says the quiet part out loud, the audience is already completely on his side. H is for harmonizing the outcome. After painting a convincing enough of an implicit argument, you can confirm the new narrative with your listener to make sure that both parties walk away on the same page. But what happens when our counterparty doesn't trust us? Or what happens when we are trying to figure out whether the person we are talking to is trustworthy or not? Click the video on screen now to watch the in-depth breakdown of how this famous person fell from grace because he was not aware of the untrustworthy signals that he was sending out all around him. My name is Glidget Ronan. I'll see you guys on the other side.